Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Daffy's Roundtable. Today, I'm joined by JD and Kit of Slithering Oddities. JD and Kit are keeping a whole bunch of really cool species and are breeding a bunch of really cool species. But in today's episode, we discuss Antaresia. We talk about children's pythons, we talk about Stimson pythons, we talk about spotted pythons, we talk about keeping them, breeding them, the difference between them. Basically, in this episode, you'll find everything you need to know about the Antaresia genus. I'm super excited about this episode. I think Antaresia make an incredible pet. They're a super underrated species, and I think more people need to be keeping them. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of information out there about them, and the best way to find that information is to talk to people that have been breeding them and working with them for a long time. And Slithering Oddities is just that. But before we begin, allow me to thank Exoterra for sponsoring this podcast and making this episode possible. Exoterra makes quality products for our pet reptiles to make them feel at home. Okay, without further ado, everybody please help me welcome JD and Kit of Slithering Oddities.
Hey guys, what's up?
How's it going?
Good, how are you? We're dropping things already. I love it. First of all, thank you both very much for joining me. I'm very excited to talk about pythons. And yeah, let's just get going with it. How have you guys started? Give me the story of how you guys kind of started. When did you start keeping reptiles? All of that.
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
Well, technically, you started before me.
I did.
So you should start.
I started as like a young teen. Like I even had like an adult when I was real young. For a little. Then when I was a teen, I got into some lizards, and eventually I was allowed to get a snake, and I got like a ball python, and then I got a boa. That's kind of where it all began for me. And then I had like a subscription, like Reptiles magazine at the time, and it was really good back then. I mean, it's good today, but it was really good back then. And I just found all these other animals that I just over time, began to really fall in love with, and thought about keeping, and eventually thought about breeding. And I've bred a lot of stuff over the years. The first thing I ever bred was Amazon tree boas.
That's awesome.
Ball pythons were like my next two. I can't remember which exactly came first. I know it was like in the same year. And then I met a girl, got married, and didn't keep as much for a while. And then towards what I would find out soon would be the end of our marriage, we had talked about me like getting back into some snakes and stuff. So I got like a pretty decent little collection of ball pythons going, and a couple other things. I had some genetic striped bredeli, and some young olives, and children's pythons, rosy boas, a few different things. And then we kind of split. And then I was like doing my local shows here in Ohio. I do the Columbus show and have for years upon years. And everybody just had ball pythons so much. And this was before it started to bottom out at all, really. This was like several years pre-COVID, and I was like, man, I don't know, this is looking rough. If you're going to breed ball pythons, everybody's got the same thing, and I want to see some other stuff anyway. So I was like, well, you know what? I'll just, I'm doing okay with these balls, and I'm starting to like make some movement, but I'd rather work with some other things. So I'm going to just go ahead and totally get out of balls. And then I'm going to trade it on stuff that I really want, like jungle carpets. And I think I traded for some bloods, some emerald tree boas, a few things. And that kind of started my journey to where I am now, working with several kinds of Australian and Indonesian python species. I'm also into like West Indian boas and Amazon tree boas, emeralds, anything weird that's not like your mainstream pet that probably wants to bite you. That's really what I'm into. We've been working it and building it, and it's finally getting somewhere, it feels like. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then about 5 years ago, I met her, and then I'll let her take over from here.
I actually hadn't had any experience at all prior to meeting him. And then, of course, once he and I met, then I started getting really involved in the animals, and he started teaching me. And I had really a wicked crash course to a lot of the the cool stuff. Instead of just the balls, we had the Australian species and stuff, and I got to be a part of building the Antaresia collection to what it is now.
Yeah.
And doing that stuff and getting into now we're getting into lizards and stuff. So I've only been in it for last 5 years, but it's been really great. Still learning stuff every day.
Yeah, that was a tough learning curve.
Yeah.
It's like here's advanced species to start.
Yeah. You don't need to work with cresties or ball pythons or any of that. Just jump into the big stuff.
Yeah, here's an olive python and a maculosa. Have fun.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Best way to learn, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
most stuff will be easier from there if it's not venomous.
Exactly. Do you guys work with any venomous?
No, just beaded lizards. Where I'm
Cool.
from, we're own venomous, and the only thing that falls legally is like Gila monsters and beaded lizards and rear fang colubrids.
Well, that and tarantulas. We have some tarantulas. Just as
scorpion. You can have a scorpion that can put you in the hospital here, but
You can't have yeah, it makes sense here as well, actually, where I am too. Same thing.
Kick your face through your head. Are you guys allowed stuff like that there?
Sorry, say that again?
You allowed to own things like venomous things there?
No, we can't. It's in Ontario. It's city bylaws, and specifically where I am in Ottawa, you can't keep anything venomous. You can keep some, I guess, technically even hognose, and in the city of Ottawa, even hognose and other rear fang species aren't allowed. But if you move a little bit further out from the city, you can keep rear fang species, but no venomous.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that's pretty much it's similar here then, a little stricter, but I know I don't know if it's still that way, but I went down and visited in like Texas, and you just had to be 18.
Keep whatever you want.
It's like a pack of smokes,
Yeah. Pack of smokes, Cobra, same thing. That's awesome. I wanted to ask you guys, since you kind of brought up the balls and then jumping away from the balls, a lot of people get in, and obviously we all do this because we love the animals and all that, but just more on the business side of things. Everyone kind of sees the ball python and sees the dollar sign, and that's why a lot of people will get into it. Do you think there's still an opportunity to build a business not working with ball pythons and crested geckos and bearded dragons and leopard geckos and all the mainstream species?
I think there is, but it's hard. You really gotta we're dropping off here. You really gotta push. You really gotta push yourself, and you really gotta market yourself. But it's tough. I mean, we sit at expos, and we could have stayed at home for a lot of them. You know what I mean? Like, we don't really move that many animals at especially our local expos all the time. Sometimes we do well, and sometimes we don't. The rare stuff is a little harder to move. It's got a little higher price tag. It's not for everyone. So there is that. But I think if you become known for it, I think you can move that kind of stuff. We've got people here like Nick Mutton and Ryan Young that, they move that kind of stuff. Obviously, they've been known for a long time, but we've got some others as well. And, I know in Canada they have Cody Joe up there, he works with a lot similar stuff to what I like. And I know he seems to do pretty well. So I think that there is a market for this stuff. And I think in an oversaturated ball python market and crested gecko market, I think there's definitely a market for different things out there. I think a lot of our traction we've gained with social media and things like that is just because of the weird stuff we work with. Even if somebody doesn't want to own it or buy it, they still want to see it. You know what I mean? people walk by the show all the time. They look at baby olives and they're like, "Oh, that's so cool." But we rarely ever move a baby olive in a show. It's one of those things. But yeah, definitely, I think there's a market. You just have to work really hard at it.
Yeah,
And
and maybe like focus on going to like bigger shows as well. We started vending tin last March, and we'll be there again this October. Doing shows like that has really it's really helped a lot.
seem to
Get
be
your
a
name
much
out
better
there.
market.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
than just our local, smaller shows. I mean, Ohio has pretty decent shows. We have some decent sized shows here. But I know some of the other states, some of the surrounding us, some of the shows are a little smaller and things like that. And it's hard for us to market rare animals to 500 people through a gate or something. You know what I mean? I mean, out of those 500 people, how many of them are buying an animal? Maybe 50, 100 max. So if they're all there for ball pythons or crested geckos or blue tongue skinks or bearded dragons, then we're just kind of sitting there. So we do breed a few colubrids, and we work some other projects as well. We're trying to help offset some of that. But we end up moving our animals. I'm always down with people to trade. If you got something I want and I got something you want, let's do it. That's that's the best way to do things. But yeah,
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
and
Is your sales primarily through through message on Instagram? Do you guys use Morph Market as well, or where do most of the sales come from?
I don't move anything online. Mostly all my sales come through shows. I've used Morph Market once in the past, and I didn't really get much traction, and I haven't really been back on it since then. Now, granted, I probably didn't really give it a real fair shake, but I don't know. I didn't seem to be getting interest, and anybody that messages me on Instagram or Facebook, it seems to be something happens where it falls through last second or something like that. So I don't really push my online presence that much for sales. I probably should a little bit more.
the goal is to have a
Yeah,
website.
I mean, I would love to just sell animals, from my house and ship them, and not ever have to take any of my animals to a show where they get risked for mites or something else. I mean, I love shows. Don't get me wrong. I love the atmosphere of shows and being a vendor at shows. But at the same time, there is a risk to your animals possibly. I know there's a lot of guys that they just kind of sell online. They maybe do one show a year or something like that.
Yeah.
That probably would not break my heart if I was selling animals that well to be doing. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. And so you mentioned colubrids and some other species that you're working with kind of offset. Do you want to maybe give us a quick? I know you work with a lot of species, a lot of really cool species, but maybe like a bit of a quick rundown of what you guys are currently working with, and then we can dive into the actual reptile conversation. I have so many Antaresia questions for you guys.
but she deals with the colubrid end, so I'll let her take that up.
Yeah, so I'm working on some variable king snakes. I'm just gonna run a pair of each of these items. I like a little bit of everything, just as many choices as possible. We've had some snowbrooks, but I've decided to go ahead and move on to other projects instead of those. So I will have those available. What else do we have? We've got the black king snakes. Those are great, Mexican black kings. I've bred those a couple times now.
Yeah, we have pretty good luck with
I've got
those.
the Colombian rainbows. They're
Colombian rainbow
albino.
boas.
Yeah, they're albinos. They're pretty cool. I'm working on my Ackies. It'll be a couple years before I can do anything with those guys.
Honduran milk snakes.
Honduran milk snakes. Yep, I've got those. I've got one's a tricolored vanishing pattern, and then the other is like an extreme hypo tangerine line, basically. So should be some cute little babies out of that. I'm hoping that we have two gravid females, but we'll see. We'll see.
about half a dozen rosy boas on her end too.
Yeah, we've got the albino rosies, and then which we've got a female, and she's probably
I think
gravid.
she's gravid. I bred rosies for years, and she's out of my original pair,
Yeah.
which one of them on the mom's still kicking around, but she's long retired.
Yep, retired. Yep.
I've got several snakes that are 25 years and older in my collection.
Yeah, and we got
That's awesome.
San Felipe rosies was the other one.
Yeah, that's our newest rosy boa project, San Felipe locale.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get a couple other locales. I love rosies. It's one that you don't see them very often, but when you have them, you do sell them. They always sell. They like them. So.
Yeah, I've heard that they only produce offspring every 2 years. Is that true?
I've definitely had females produce like the year after, but I was newer to breeding rosy boas, so every other year is probably your safe bet. Yeah. It's probably better on your animal.
Yeah, and they're pretty small little litters usually too.
Yeah, it depends. Well, I've had big litters of small babies, and I've had like small litters of big babies out of rosy boas too. No more ever than like 10 or 11 though. That was like my biggest litter.
I guess I'm used to carpet clutches and stuff.
Oh yeah, carpets are insane.
It's a little different than a rosy.
Yeah, carpets are awesome. I saw the clutch you guys just had. Beautiful little babies.
Yeah. I got to get some more individual pictures out of there. There's one in there that, man, the pattern's just a dead ringer for its mom. I was like, wow. I was like, you're a little mom.
A little mom, that's awesome. Are you holding that one back then?
Definitely. I'll probably hold on to that one and keep it around, honestly. Yeah. Never hurts to have another female. I've got a few other jungles waiting in the wings to be bred, but jungles are finicky for me. So, but we're getting them there. Hopefully next year or the year after, we'll have a couple more females that are ready to go. We can breed some, mix up some different bloodlines and see what we get.
Yeah, in terms of carpet pythons, is it just jungles you're working with?
I work with Morelia brevilli too. I've actually been working with that species longer than anything else in our collection right now. I've had a pair of genetic stripes for years. I think they're pushing 17, 18 right now. I think they're getting close to 18.
And they're still breeding, no problem.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure she's gravid right now. And then I've got a normal brevilli female that's younger than her. She's probably about 9 or 10, and she's gravid right now as well. So yeah, I'm going to have a lot of Morelia this year.
Awesome, very cool. Okay, cool. I want to touch on on all the species you guys are working with. You guys are working with a lot of really cool ones, as I said earlier. But I mainly want to talk about Antaresia because I feel like they're an incredible species that isn't being talked about enough. And similar to the rosy boas, I feel like the size just makes them a perfect pet. People are just, like I said, not enough people are working with them. You guys seem to be super successful with them. So I have a bunch of questions, if that is okay. So first of all, I've been hearing a lot about, I've just recently started working with them, so I don't have too much information, but I've recently heard that spotteds and childrens are the same species. What is your opinion on that?
Stimsons and childrens.
Stimson, sorry. Okay.
It's a bunch of hooey. I mean, like, there's obvious like differences in appearance. Obviously, even the easterns and the westerns look way different than each other. Much less looking like a children's python. Nick Mutton would be like the scientific guy on this. I forget what he told me, but I think there might even be like a little bit of different scale counts there and things like that. And then in the same fail swoop, the same guys that classify the eastern and western Stimsons in with the children's take the spotted pythons and split them out into 3 subspecies. Yeah. They split the Cape Yorks out into peninsularis, and the Australian mainland one's the maculosa, and then the Papuan one's the maculosa papuanensis, but which the Papuan ones, man, they look just like the mainland ones, only they're slightly darker to me. Like I see like Dan Maliri from DM Exotics. I watch a lot of his videos because he brings in a lot of cool Indo stuff, and I see his, and yeah, I mean they're just kind of a darker version of spotted. They're cool looking. They have really great iridescence and stuff. They almost look a little granity. They're so dark, but yeah, I don't know. It's really weird to me that they would do that and then just say, okay, all Stimson's pythons are now children's pythons, you know. But that's taxonomy, you know, and
Yeah.
like I had discussions with people about it, and to bring up Nick again, like he made a good point that like taxonomy is just a paper written by people. It's, you know, it's just an opinion of people. It really has no effect on us as a hobby, you know what I mean, and what we
Right.
do. So we can either accept that paper or we can reject that paper. You know what I mean? It's not a written law of Earth or anything like that. You know, so you know, like me, I keep Western and Eastern Stimsons. I'm never going to cross those, and I'm never going to cross them with children's pythons. You know what I mean? Because then you just, at the very least, you've got locales, if nothing else there, you know what I mean? So why cross the locale? So, but yeah, I don't really think it's all that justified, but you know, I didn't write the paper either, so.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And maybe we'll take a step back. How many species of Antaresia are you guys currently working with? And do you know how many there are in the hobby?
Well, technically, species-wise, now there's only 3. You got your childreni, and your Stimsons are lumped in there, and then you got your maculosa, and then everything's subspecied out, and then you've got your perthensis, which is your pygmies, and that's actually the only Antaresia I don't work with for the most part in America that we have, except for T-positive children's, which is a morph. But yeah, I mean, it went from being like 5 different species down to 3.
Yeah.
And then you've got like the banded pygmies coming over from Europe, which are a form of Stimsons, and they look way different than the other 2 Stimsons.
Of course they do.
Way different than a children's python too. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you said the pygmies, you're talking about like the antilles?
Hills, yeah. A lot of people used to refer to them as pygmies. I'm old, but as far as what we have, I'll try to start through my process of caging here and see.
Right.
I've got we've obviously got children's pythons. Within children's pythons, I actually hatched a like patternless animal like 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago now. We're still working on trying to prove that out. We're producing some really weird babies out of it, so hopefully we're getting pretty close. And then we've got spotted pythons. We have striped spotteds, granite spotteds, and Cape York spotteds. And then I also have stuff I'm raising up that is striped, but also het for granite, which we really haven't seen much of that yet, the stripe may wash away with the granite. It's quite possible, but I'm going to try it anyway, just for the heck of it, you know. And then we have Eastern Stimsons, and we have wheat belt locale Western Stimsons. And I think that's about it on the Antaresia.
It's awesome. Are you able to visually tell the difference between all the spotted pythons? Is there like pattern differences?
Yeah, I could. If you showed me like 3 pictures of them, I could pick them apart. Yeah. Especially.
Cool. I'm gonna send you a picture of my spotted python after this then.
The Cape Yorks look so much different, and they get a little bigger than the other spotteds too. Like them, I could see them being broke out into a subspecies because it makes sense. They definitely have a different appearance. They come from a certain locale, you know, like, and they get a little bigger. So I could definitely see that. But the other 2 spotteds, to me, they're the same animal.
Very cool. We'll get into breeding them, but before we do that, going back to the carpet python clutch you guys just had, I noticed in the picture you posted you're keeping them on Orbeez, or the
Yeah.
eggs on Orbeez at least. Is there a reason you do that?
I don't like vermiculite, and then I used perlite for a long time, and it was okay, but I decided I didn't like it either. And then I switched to hatchite, but hatchite is too wet out of the bag for like Aussie stuff for me. But this year I went to suspension, so that probably wouldn't have mattered anyway. But I picked it up from an Australian breeder, an Antaresia breeder named Peter Staten Jr. over there. I saw he was using them, and I just decided to ask him about them. He's like, "Oh yeah, a lot of people are using them here, you know, and stuff." So I decided to use them as my incubation medium this year, and they work great. They are fantastic. You know, you leave about an inch in between that and your suspension grate. That way, if they get too full, they don't grow up through your grates or anything like that. But yeah, they work great. They keep the humidity perfect, and then when you're done, you can yank your grate and everything out of there, and you got a ball pit for your snakes to play in and take videos of. So
And clean them off, which is nice.
yeah, it's
Keeps them
water too, so
hydrated.
it kind of washes some of the muck off the babies. We noticed and all that. So yeah.
And there's no concern of them trying at that age to try to like swallow one or anything, right?
No, I mean, I would never be concerned much about a fresh hatchie, like wanting to swallow much of anything
Swallowing.
with that yolk in them like that. So much less something, you know, made of, what's it made out of, like acrylic or silicone or a silicone, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, most babies aren't ready to eat for a week or two after they shed usually. So, yeah, I don't worry too much about that. I don't think it would be a problem. You never know, though. Weird things happen.
That's true. That's a fascinating idea, though. I'd never even thought of it or seen anything like that until I saw the picture, and I was like, that's so interesting.
Yeah, I'd rather them eat that than a chunk of vermiculite, though.
Yeah.
I mean, vermiculite's known to be toxic, so.
Right. Right. And do you have to top it off with water every so often while through the incubation process?
You know what? I didn't really have to add much water unless I felt like maybe the humidity wasn't high enough in the tub or something like that. They didn't ever like dry out on me and get real small or anything like that. I've got several clutches down there cooking right now, and they've all got Orbeez in them. They're awesome. Like they're so much easier to use than vermiculite and perlite. Perlite's dusty as crap, and you know you're like breathing that stuff the whole time you're working with it. And vermiculite can be too if it's the fine. And then you know you're playing with the water and you're trying to get the perfect clumping that you want it. You know, I mean, with these you just dump some water. You dump them in a 5-gallon bucket. You dump water in there. You let them blow up. You fill the thing up, and you put your grate in. You're done. You know, it takes all the guesswork out of putting water in your incubation medium.
It's probably a lot cheaper too.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I got a bag like this that was like, what was that, $4 or $5?
Yeah.
And it, like, I've got half a 5-gallon bucket sitting down there of them still that are just waiting to be used or you know whatever. So yeah, a little bag makes a ton of them.
Yeah. The only thing I would tell people, if you know, would just be make sure, because I know that there's some Orbeez out there that are like scented. Don't those.
Yep.
Do
Right
not use those. Just
I did not know that.
non-scented regular Orbeez. You don't want anything crazy in there with your snake.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense too. Awesome. So, okay, so on the topic of breeding, can you walk us through a little bit of the process of breeding your Antaresia? I've heard from people that females will eat the males. I've heard people say pair them for 2 months at a time. I've heard people say put the male in for 24 hours and pull him out. Do you have any like tips and tricks on that kind of thing?
I mean, my process basically, I guess everybody kind of has their own process. So for me, I stop feeding usually in like late September or early October. Lately, it's been like mid-September, last 2 weeks of September, I stopped feeding. That way they're cleaned out, and I'll start cooling like October 1st. So what I do is I just gradually work the temperature down on my thermostat. Usually weekly is how I do it. I'll drop it like 5 degrees weekly until I get that nighttime temperature down to set at 68. And then in the morning it kicks back on to 90-degree hot spot and all that, and then it goes until about, I usually run 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. on my cooling. And then what I'll do is I'll start pairing about 2 weeks into that cooling period. Usually you won't see a lot of action for the first month or anything like that. With Antaresia though, sometimes you will. They're pretty prolific once you get them together. Now, as far as like the cannibalistic nature, I've heard that that's happened, and I did have a female. She really got a hold of a male this year, and we thought we were going to lose her, man. And they were not like full size children's pythons. They were young breeders, but man, she really let him have it, and we thought he was going to die. We got her off of him, thank God, but. And then they were fine, and 15 minutes later they were locked, and she laid eggs this year. But it happens, I think. I think the biggest thing, like for me last year, we didn't get cool very quick. We stayed warm here. And I think part of it was that I couldn't get my temperatures down as low as I wanted them to be when I first started pairing. It took a couple extra weeks to get me to hit that like a low 70s, 68 type temperature that I'm going for. But after that, everything was fine. I haven't had a ton of problems with females trying to eat males, but they've bitten them a couple times. It does happen here and there. Then when I keep pairing, I don't really take males out a lot. Because to me, the more you take that male out, the more you're missing that opportunity for him to fertilize those ova, So, I mean, sometimes I'll have a male in there for a month, and if he's not worried about food and he looks good and, she's not worried about food, that's fine, they'll be fine in there as long as they're getting along. And usually if you're going to have a problem, it's right out of the gate, it's not going to be 3-4 days later, usually for the most part. But weird things do happen, so always keep an eye on your animals. That's something I can't like say enough. If you're breeding stuff, check on it at least a couple times a day. If you're breeding it, check on it, because weird things happen, or she could lay a clutch and you could have had your date wrong or something like that written down, and next thing you know, you got a shriveled up clutch of diamond pythons or something, and you're beating yourself over the head. Yeah, like as we get closer to spring, then I'll start doing the same thing, only backwards. I just gradually climb that temperature up, and maybe I even start setting my hot spot to be on longer. You know what I mean? Instead of being off 12, maybe it's only off 8, and then maybe it's only off 6, and then maybe it's only off 4, and then by last week maybe it's only off a couple hours, and then we're back to full heat. To me, I mean, I think seasonal change needs to kind of be seasonal change too. And not everything's going to be cut and dry for these animals in the wild when they breed, So, when it's cooler, it's going to be cooler. And when it warms up, it's going to gradually warm up, It's not just going to, I don't ever just be like, okay, cooling's over, we're going from 68 for 12 hours to 90, like 24/7, like that could shock your animal a little bit, and probably not give you a real productive year. Sorry about the dogs there. They must have saw a dog outside.
No, it's all good.
But that's pretty much my process. And when it comes to like pythons and snakes, I tend to like keep them together for a while. Most of the time your male's not going to eat anyway once he's reproductive. So as long as he's looking good, then he's good to go. Every once in a while, yeah, I'll yank the male out of there. It's a 5-month breeding season. I'll maybe yank a male out like twice and feed him, you know what I mean, during that 5-month area, or maybe take him out or something if I see that she's already there. Or maybe just take him out if I think he's getting a little lean and be like, hey, get some rest. Or if I see him breeding real hard for several days or something like that, that's a decent time to get your male some rest. But the good news is that your snakes are mostly pretty smart most of the time. And when they don't want to breed and they're tired, they just won't breed in the enclosure. They'll just go lay next to each other or something, that's pretty much what mine do. Like my blood pythons will breed for like 3 days straight. It seems like I go back down and they're in the same spot they were in, and then a week of nothing, of them in the cage together and just totally ignoring each other. So
That makes sense. And for the 5 month period, do you not feed the females at all?
I feed females once I start warming back up. I don't feed anything when I'm in cooling. I don't like to have food in anything's gut when it's not at optimal temperatures. So when I'm in cooling, I just cut the food. When springtime comes back, if I got females that aren't quite gravid yet, or like I'm not seeing like follicles or eggs, then I'll may pump a couple meals to get them spurred up, and maybe that'll get them reproductive. But yeah, I think food cycling is super important with your animals, as well as the cool cycling. And some of the endo stuff we've been getting into and stuff, that's really a thing there. So there's just times a year where their food's not available, and then there's times a year where it's everywhere. So yeah, I think food cycling is definitely important, especially dealing with some of the different pythons of the world.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you said when you're not seeing the follicles there, is there a way to see them visually without, or like, how do you determine that?
When I feel them, like I just palpate and feel for follicles. I'll use like the tip of my finger and just kind of let them climb right over it, and you can just feel the little bumps as your finger slides down their belly. And then you can even kind of feel how big they are from there. You can feel if they're like a BB size or a grape size, or And then when the eggs are there, you can feel those too. A lot of times you can see them. So
Cool. And then do you pay attention to pre-lay sheds and ovulation times and all that as well?
definitely, I try to catch ovulations as much as I can. I do work a full-time job on top of my snake keeping, so I don't catch them all. I love when I catch them though, because for me that's like, oh yeah, like I know what's happening now. Like at least I know where we're sitting. Um, but yeah, I definitely look for ovulations. The pre-lay shed is usually the most important thing for me. You definitely want to track your sheds, during breeding season, especially if you're not used to looking at a gravid female or something. Um, and look 27 days later after that shed for sure, because if she's reproductive, there might be some eggs sitting there. But yeah, that's just why you want to check me. I'm a nutbag. Like as soon as she sheds, I'm down there like 3 times a day. Like, like how you looking?
Can't miss the eggs.
We doing good?
Yeah, and how important is it for you? Do you keep track? Do you write these things down, like pre-lay shed or shed or whatever?
Mark a shed date like somewhere on my enclosure. I'll either do it like with like China marker on a tub or something like that. That works great. Or like post-its on an enclosure or something like that. Or even you could even do a piece of masking tape or something. With a Sharpie. That would work well. But yeah, I always do that, and then that helps me in my mind keep track of time and things like that, because I'm not good at keeping track of time.
Me neither. Me neither. Not at all. What's your average clutch that you get out of, like, say, the children? And is there a lot of similarities between children's and spotteds when it comes to breeding them?
Yeah, I breed all, actually not just Antaresia. I breed all my Australian stuff that I keep, except for bred alive, the exact same way across the board. That whether it be the Antaresia, the olives, water pythons, jungle carpets. I pretty much do the same thing with all of it. I shoot for the same temperature goals and all that. So, yeah, the routine's pretty much the same. But yeah, as far as like breeding spotteds or Stimsons or children's, those three, it's pretty much the same. I seem to have I had great luck with spotteds my first year, but for some reason I seem to have less luck with spotteds right now. But we'll get there on them. They'll go for
That's
us.
it's interesting. What's the difference with you? You mentioned the Bredlii. You're doing something different with them.
Well, they come from a harsher climate than a lot of the Aussie stuff. So cooling them's almost like cooling diamond pythons or something. You know, them and diamond pythons are like the Aussie species that kind of break the rules. Um, with Bredli, you need to get them down into like the low to mid 50s for a couple weeks at night. So, I mean, you don't completely have to, but you'll get a lot better results with your breeding if you do that. That's just what they're used to in nature. I mean, they have super high temperatures in the summer and super cold temperatures in the winter. They come from a place called Alice Springs, which is almost in the heart of Australia. So it's like I think it's like in the center of the Red Desert somewhere, pretty much, where there's like a river and a town and some life and stuff like that. That's basically where your Bredli live in those surrounding areas. They're also a separate species. I don't know if you know, a lot of the carpet pythons are basically the same species, just a subspecies, Morelia spilota. Morelia bredli is actually a separate species because they don't intergrade with any other carpets in the wild. I believe the inland carpet python is like that as well. It's also a separate species because it does not intergrade.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kit, do you have a favorite from all the Antaresia species?
Oh, probably the Eastern Stimsons. Yeah, I just dig how clean their patterning and stuff is.
Awesome. And you mentioned those are the same, like you work with them the same way as everything else.
Yeah, pretty much everything Australian. Yeah, I kind of treat it the same way when I go to breed it, and actually when I heat it, the humidity, everything pretty much, unless I was going to keep like an Australian green tree or something like that, you know, that actually some humidity. But most of your Aussie species, that's one more reason they make a great pet that I don't think people realize is your Aussie species, they do fine with the humidity in your house. They don't really need like extra humidity. 45 to 50% is plenty. So they'll shed out clean and that and everything. So it's hot there, not necessarily super humid all the time, though, you know.
Well, plus you can't beat how small their enclosures
Yeah,
are.
yeah.
It's really
Well,
easy
yeah.
to.
Well, and they're pretty tidy for keeping a snake. That's
Yeah.
one of the things I like about them. And you know, like a room full of different species of snakes, like Antaresia, are one of the least messy snakes we keep, for sure. They don't trash their water bowls really. They poop in corners for the most part. You know, yeah, they're pretty good pet snakes for a lot of reasons. I guess the knock on them is, you know, the overzealous feeding. You know, like my breeders, I don't really handle them much. They're not something you really want to handle a lot. You know,
Right.
but you know, I've had several people come back to me and say, "Hey, I picked up this children's or this Stimson's from you, and this thing is like the sweetest snake ever." You know, so that just goes to show you somebody that takes the time and works with them, and you know that they do calm out. And the little ones are always fiery for me, but then you like get them in your hand and they just kind of sit there all nervous, wondering if they should try to bite or not. You know, and most of
Yeah,
them.
they're adorable. I have a pair of children's and a tiny little like sits in my hand like this spotted. And he's adorable. Like every time, like you said, every time you go near him, he wants to strike, but then you pick him up and put him in. It's just adorable. How young can you sex Antaresia?
Oh, fairly young. It's not super easy all the time, but you know, usually I have to take a couple cracks at it. My biggest problem when I pop snakes and like sex them is I'm afraid to hurt them. You know, if it's like a thicker, sturdier animal, like a blood, or like a, you know, even like a baby olive or a ball python or something. Like ball pythons are the best snakes ever. You just like touch them and they avert pretty much. It's freaking
Yeah.
great. Um, but yeah, like the smaller stuff, it's hard, and my eyes aren't as good as they used to be either. So sometimes I have to really look. Like, did I see something? Did I not? You know, like I tried to pop some of those carpets yesterday, and it was just impossible. I was like, I'm gonna have to wait until these have a little more muscle tone to them or something. You know. But yeah, usually pretty young. I can usually sex them pretty accurately. I don't know. I'd say probably like 2 months.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool. And could you run us through how you guys keep like a bit of a Antaresia setup?
I keep pretty basic. I pretty much I use a rack system for most of my stuff.
Okay.
I go with I just use like a water bowl, a hide. Aspen is my preferred bedding of choice, and you know, um, give them a couple of things in there to mess around on if you want, a little branch or netting or something like that when they're young. Netting works great, like people for carpets, TVs, and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, especially during breeding season, I go very basic and I really like strip things down. A, because I want to be able to see the animals easily. Um, During breeding season, I also often like to use paper as a substrate because when your male averts his hemipene, if there's a chunk of aspen stuck to it or some bark, that's going inside, you know. So
Right.
hopefully that won't cause an infection, but it can. So another thing on paper too is that you can often see like the females drags, like her blood drags and things like that. So there's a lot of advantages to that for me when I breed. But I am a person. I'm looking to go a little less basic with some of my stuff. So I'm getting ready to invest in building all kinds of caging, which should be a fantastic project. It'll be great when it's done, but it'll probably suck for a while.
It's always the in between process is always the headache. You're like, I want to get them in this setup, but then I have to put in the money and the time to build it and all that. No, absolutely, that makes sense. Do you ever see your females or your males soaking? Sorry, were you about to say something? I think you cut out there.
I want to see some of my stuff and more, you know, less manufactured stuff and more where I can just look at it a little bit better sometimes. Even like the plastic manufactured caging, it's so dark and stuff. You know, it's not great for viewing your animal all the time. Sorry, what were you asking me there?
Yeah, well, I was gonna ask you about them spending time in water bowls, but I'll comment on what you were saying first. Do they spend a lot of time out in general? And Teresa, do you see them
Yeah,
often, or are they mostly kind of curled up?
mine usually are out cruising, especially you know when I open the enclosure. In the morning, sometimes not as much. I think it's because they're kind of hunkering down, like on that heat source overnight and stuff. But yeah, like during the day, they're quite active, you know, and for a nocturnal animal.
Yeah.
You know, I think too, you know, they understand like when somebody's there and shuffling around and moving things, and you know, you got tubs sliding and doors opening, and you know, like your snakes will start figuring it out. You know, they
There
know
could be food.
you know they know something's coming.
Yeah, 100%. When I walk in with the rat bucket, everyone's heads kind of comes up now. Like, are we about to get fed?
My olives, my big adults will just cruise the enclosure while I'm down there and just follow me as much as they can.
That's awesome. They're definitely a lot smarter than I think we give them credit for.
For sure.
Do you ever see? I don't know if this is a sign of being gravid or anything like that, but do you ever see your females soaking in water
Uh, like
or in the
Antaresia?
water bowls? Yeah,
Not really. Some of my young like to use the water bowls as like perches sometimes, like
yeah.
the cup holders. They'll just hang on them. But no, I don't see my Antaresia soak very much at all. Um, usually not much of a thing that I've noticed.
And do you think that this could be a humidity issue? Because I know you mentioned Australia. Obviously, they don't need as much humidity in the house and your average house. But over here in Canada, the houses are dry. I don't even think it gets to 45, 50. Do you think that them soaking a lot is like a sign of like needing hydration or being too dry?
Possible. I know there's areas of Australia though where sometimes the humidity is as low as 20, 25%, you know, so especially stuff that comes from like that northwestern like desert area, you know. But it could be. It could be. As long as you're not seeing any. How long have you had it?
4 or 5 months, 6 months.
No bugs or anything. Bug free.
No, it's also they're also in their own room completely from everything else. So
Snake is always what you think when you see a snake soak. You know what I mean?
that like you're talking about like mites or something, for example.
Yeah. But yeah, it could be. It could be that snake trying to like boost the humidity a little bit, or maybe you know it feels a little dry or something like that, or maybe it's just a snake that likes sitting in the water. You know, so like we've got a variable king snake. The male, he sits in his water bowl all the time, and I'm like, does this thing have mites or something? You know, like because that's a king snake, you know, and it's a king snake from Mexico, nonetheless. You know, like
Yeah.
it's not like it's always like super damp there or something. But yeah, I mean, he just does it like frequently. Just this thing, I guess.
That makes sense. Is there any signs that you look for when you think you have a gravid female that sort of indicate, other than being able to feel the eggs, anything you can see, any signs?
Definitely. I mean, you're going to look for like a pyramid, like almost like triangle shape to the body. She's going to, like the spine will probably be raised some, and then it'll like kind of come down in a pyramid shape and then round out at the bottom. So that's a sign I look for. Like I call it, like a lot of people call it ridgeback, and I refer to it as ridgeback a lot. Like I'll be like, she's got ridgeback, you know, like that's a good sign. So, excuse me. But yeah, that's definitely one of the signs that I really look for in females. Obviously, if your female was on a food tear or something, like when you warm back up and then she's not wanting to eat anything at all, that's usually a good sign as well.
Yeah. Also, inverted laying is a really.
Yeah. Inverted laying, that usually happens past ovulation.
What do you mean by that?
The snakes will often lay like upside down or with parts of them upside down, or side laying where they lay on their sides with their belly exposed. It's just something gravid females do because they're uncomfortable, and it may be something where they're trying to warm different sides of the egg as well. You know, that could be part of it. Maybe they're trying to get different parts of their body warm to spell that heat to different parts of the egg. But yeah, really common. I've seen it in all kinds of different pythons. You know, ball pythons exhibit it, blood pythons, Antaresia. The Stimsons exhibit it heavily when they're gravid. But yeah, all kinds of stuff. I've never really seen carpets do a lot of inverted laying. I have had females, you know, kind of lay kind of inverted, and like, but more of like a side.
Yeah, not like completely upside down.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. When it comes to the babies, once they're born, is it hard to get them on food?
Sometimes. Actually, most of them take off pretty well after their first shed. But there's always like one or two a year that just give you hell. But yeah, usually, you know, like I was talking to somebody earlier, somebody on social media, and they didn't realize, you know, like when a snake's born, that you wait until after it sheds to try to feed it. So yeah, after that first shed, you can start offering food pretty much the next day, and some will take probably a small amount you know, and then the second or third attempt, you'll have a couple more and a couple more, you know, and then usually by about the fifth attempt, you're pretty much rounded out, unless you've got just some picky ones. Picky ones are tough. I usually start them on tails. Rat tail segments work best for me. I'll take like a tail from a weaned or a small rat, and I'll cut a segment about the length of a pinky, and I'll kind of put it in the mouth a little bit, and I'll like kind of turn it a little bit, and then just kind of use my pinky real lightly to pretty much push it back into the throat, close the mouth, and then I'll even work it down a little bit because I know Antaresia from breeding them, and they're not something that I've ever been able to just straight up assist feed, really. You know, like you can a ball python, you just hook the teeth in and it swallows it the rest of the way. I have to get it past their throat, or they'll just spit it right back out. I did have a little one this year, a little children's from my patternless that was real finicky, and I was feeding it nothing but tails for a while. And then I was actually able to assist feed it, but I think it actually got used to me feeding it because I'd been assist feeding it for months, you know. So eventually I took a pinky and I kind of put it in and closed its mouth, and then it would start eating it. And that took about 4 times, and now it's finally eating stuff on its own, which is great. I actually got it to eat off of tongs last week, and that's the first time that's happened. And I love to feed off of tongs because it makes things quick, easy, and a little bit fun too.
Agreed. Yeah, that makes sense. Do you feed them multiple times a week when they're first in that early stage, or is it still just like once a week or once every few days?
About every 5 days. I pretty much feed weekly. You know, I keep it pretty stuff, especially my babies and stuff like that. You know, adults I can do a little more. Well, you know, it's Tuesday and I was supposed to feed these today, but it's not a big deal, you know, because they're adults, you know. But babies, I tend to stay on a little tighter schedule. I usually do like a Monday thing where I'll just feed babies. And look in on them, make sure they're cared for and spot clean or clean the whole enclosure or whatever it might need.
Yeah. Are there any projects you guys are super excited about for this year?
Oh, well, like that's in the incubator. I'm really excited for my next clutch, which is maculosa pythons, because I've never bred those before, and it's a smaller clutch. Still pretty happy about it. I'm really excited to see what comes out of my children's clutches this year too. Actually, the 2 clutches I have in there. I mean, the one pairing is my largest pair, and I've had them forever, and they're the ones that made my patternless. And it was weird because I bred them like probably 4 times before that, and I never got anything weird out of them. You know, it was just pretty standard looking childreni. And then that year, she just had a clutch, and this thing just came popping out of it, and I was like, "What the hell is that thing?" And I mean,
And it's completely patternless?
yeah, it's like reddish almost. It's a little browner now that it's an adult, but it's reddish. And I looked in Australia, and they have stuff that looks just like her.
Interesting.
So I'm hoping it's a recessive thing, and I can get it to prove out. I've got one offspring from 2 years ago, and I've got 4 offspring from last year that I'm raising up. So, and then she's got a couple clutch mates that they just kind of throw some weird, odd stuff, and they're kind of weird, odd looking at times. Like sometimes you open the enclosure and they just look like a glazed donut sitting there. Like it's weird. They're like shining, and they're real light and glazy. And then the next time you open it up, and they're standard tan and brown. You know, I don't know if they have the ability to maybe fire up and fire down. I don't know. But they definitely produce some weird looking stuff too, compared to some animals. So hopefully we'll crack the code here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Kit, what about yourself? Any projects you're particularly excited about?
Well, that's currently in the incubator. Peg and Al, those two children's pythons that he was talking about. I'm excited.
Yeah. Okay.
To produce. I was really excited about the jungles. That was something that we've been working on for a while, and it was really exciting to see how that all panned out. And the 3 sets of twins. That's craziness.
Yeah.
So
jungles are something we do get asked for, though.
We do. A lot of
we have for a few years now, and we've been like, we have some, we just can't get them to breed yet.
Yeah. With my stuff, I mean, I'm hoping that I can still get some Hondurans, Honduran eggs. I've been working on that project for a few years. Hondurans was actually the first project I got into for myself. So fingers crossed on that one this year. We'll see.
I'm also,
that's awesome,
because we do have an Amazon tree bow out on loan, a het calico, back to the breeder of her originally. He said she's looking good, so I'm going to get small numbers, but I'll just be stoked to have some baby Amazons again until I can raise the rest of mine up.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is seeing? Oh, now I have so many more questions. Is seeing twins in carpets usual? And then why were you not able to pair them to or breed them till now? Are they harder than most Australian pythons?
No, well, twins isn't necessarily usual. I've hatched a couple twin eggs in the past, and one of them happened to be a Brettles carpet. But the other one I hatched was like pewter ball pythons. But I've never seen more than one twin egg in a clutch. I mean, granted, this is a clutch of 25, so there's a little better odds of that something like that happening than an 8 to 10 ball python clutch or something like that. But I don't think it's all that common that happens.
Yeah, when we Googled it, it said basically like it has happened, but just not all that often.
What was the second part of your question there? Sorry.
Just about like why you mentioned like people have been asking you for jungles for a while, but you haven't been able to. Yeah.
Mainly because we've been raising a young group. I have a male that's been ready to go. When I got out of ball pythons, I traded for this male and a female. The female ended up dying on me like a month later. But the male, he's still kicking around, but he's been ready to go for a little bit. So then we went and got a female like a couple of years later, and she's a smoke show, man. She's incredible looking, but she's super finicky, and she only wants to eat birds nowadays. So being that she was on birds, I couldn't quite put the weight on her as quick as I would have been able to with rats, and the size. So hopefully next year. And then we do have another younger female that we picked up a couple of years ago, maybe a little less than a couple of years ago, that we're just kind of raising up as another female. But we just didn't have anything breeding size. And the pair we bred this year, they were donated to me. Somebody was getting out of their animals, and like he sent me pictures and stuff, and like they have lineage and stuff like that to them as well. And they were just really nice looking carpets, and I was like, yeah, I'll take them. And then I ended up going there, and like I ended up getting all kinds of supplies with them and everything else, which he definitely didn't have to do. He could have sold that stuff, but I think he just wanted to move it out of there. But he had just donated me a children's python the week before, and we planned on keeping that and breeding it because he said it was a female. But I put my big male in with it, and they just started wrestling, and I was like, "Oh, that's not a female." And it looked a little smaller for a female. I probably should have sexed that before I threw them together, but nothing bad happened, and they were only in there for a couple seconds. I just started noticing the heads going like over. I was like, "No, that's done."
I'm not doing this. Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned emerald tree boas there. Have you had any luck breeding them?
No, because I need another one. I haven't luck keeping the one I have. The same thing. I actually got those when I traded. and I lost one of those unfortunately too. I think the only pairing I had that went all the way were my blood pythons there, um, but yeah, I'd like to get another one. It's just, man, I struggle to pull the trigger to get a northern emerald because all I see is wild caughts, you know. But you go captive bred and you're looking at $1,200 too. So it just depends, I guess. I'll probably end up buying captive bred. I don't know. When I see wild caught emeralds at expos and stuff, they do not look good to me. Like they never look good to me. They always look like they need hydrated and some food and maybe a vacation.
I mean, same. I look like I need hydration and food and a vacation. That's funny. That's cool. I mean, we're about at about an hour now. I do want to wrap it up, but maybe just to quickly re-swing it back to Antaresia on that note. I just hit my head doing this. Do you guys think more people should be working with them? I mean, I know in terms of okay, there's the answer. Yeah.
I think one reason is like obviously when you work with the rare stuff, morphs aren't always your priority, but those Australian morphs will hit this market eventually. Yeah. Those marbles and those tarbles and those albino macs and all that kind of stuff. Eventually, someone will find a way to smuggle that stuff over through Europe or wherever. You know what I mean? It's inevitable. It will happen. And like that may not be the greatest thing in the world that we got people smuggling animals. But these things are captive bred at least over there too. It's not like they're plucking them out of the wild. But yeah, I think eventually some of that stuff's going to make its way over here. And I think if enough people work with them, maybe we'll just find some of that stuff too. I don't think I had a lot of that stuff really. And a lot of the people that did, like I got one in the late '90s. A lot more people were into like Aussie stuff and different stuff. It was before the ball python market really hit hard. Back then, ball pythons were mostly wild caughts.
Right.
Sorry, I got off track there. But yeah, sorry, what was I saying?
You were talking about the ball python market for a moment there.
Yeah, I had a point, but I didn't get there.
No, I think the point you were trying to get to is there's the reason ball pythons are so popular is because of the morphs, but eventually there will be Antaresia morphs.
That's where I was getting to. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I would probably also add that the Australian species, I mean, we are limited in the United States of what we have. And if people don't start working with some of these species, we're going to start seeing these species get less and less. We're already seeing it in a lot of our other ones. There's only a good handful of people breeding olive pythons, and stuff like that. So eventually, if people don't start working with it, it could disappear in the U.S. hobby, and we could, lose those animals here for a while, and that sucks.
Yeah, so definitely. Also,
sucks badly, yeah.
What I had was a lot of people crossed the Antaresia without knowing that they were crossing the Antaresia. So in America too, a lot of the bloodlines have been muddied. You probably lost a lot of that stuff when the ball python craze took over, but some of it's probably still out there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Do you think more people should be working with just a variety of Australian pythons in general, like you guys mentioned, the olives, which I don't know if are olives Australian?
Yeah,
or are they from Indo? They are. Okay, yeah, just like olives and stuff like that.
Papuans are from Indo, or they call them Papuan olives.
Okay.
So it's real similar color, size, everything. As far as more people working with Australian stuff, I would love to see more people work with Australian stuff. Yeah. But at the same time, I wouldn't say it's as specific as something like a retic or like a rock python or something big like that. but there is like a harsher learning curve to some of this stuff. So people need to understand python behavior a lot before they work with certain species. Most of it's not too bad, and you'll get that learning curve as you raise it from a baby, you know. But some people can't handle that learning curve. They don't have the patience to wait till that animal becomes an adult or reaches sexual maturity and becomes a much more confident and tractable animal to work with, you know. A lot of people don't use their tools, you know what I mean? If you don't use tools and you work with Aussie Indo pythons, you're probably going to have a bad time sometimes. It's you know, they're very food motivated, very reactive. You know, all pythons are food motivated, but people that would go from say like the ball python world to like the carpet world, they're probably in for a little bit of a rude awakening at first, you know, or
By
liasis.
tools, you mean hooks and tongs and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I use hooks to like redirect my animals a lot, you know. That's the easiest way to get a hold of your animal. Just redirect it with a hook or a roll of paper towels or something, you know, just so it knows you're not food. And my animals, oftentimes, they just, as soon as you touch them with a hook, they're just like, oh, I'm out of here, you know, like they take off, you know, and then you can just reach right in. And, you know, when you come up from behind and scoop up under a snake, it takes that a lot better than you just reaching in and grabbing it, you know. So so yeah, use it. You want to use hooks. Another thing that I would suggest to people that want to keep, especially larger species of these, I often will feed my animals. I'll open the enclosure, say it's like a carpet, a mac lot, something like that. I know it's going to be ready, so I'll open the enclosure. I'll let them hit the rodent, and when they hit the rodent, I'll keep a hold of my tongs, and with my other hand, I will often just grab them by the tail and I'll move them to the tub. I've never really had problems with them letting go or anything like that. If you got something super swirly, maybe watch it, you know. But I usually don't. Usually, once they have food in their mouth, they're not letting go of that, you know. So it's a real easy way to work around your animals that maybe are a little dodgier and things like that. Because if you can just get them out of there and get them in a tub, then you can go in, you can clean your enclosure while you're feeding them, you know, you change your water, whatever you need to do. If it's something where I need to get in there just to like change the water or something, that's where a hook comes in handy again. You know, you can tap your animal. I even like will hold it on my animal a little bit while I'm doing what I'm doing. And a lot of times that lets them know that, okay, you know, I don't smell food and there's nothing in front of my face, so I'm guessing this isn't food this time around. But yeah, just, you know, working with them and using your tools to work around them will often get them to the point where they're just much easier to work with for you, you know, especially
Yeah.
reactive animals. Like we have some white lip pythons, and I couldn't even hardly touch them when we got them. They just whip around on you real quick, and but now, you know, with a hook in the front, I can tail them back into enclosures and things like that. Whereas before they wouldn't let me do that. They just whip right around and bite me.
That's awesome. Have you paired the white lips?
Not yet. They're not quite old enough. Maybe next year. Maybe next year. So that's
Fingers
something
crossed. Yeah.
I'd like to produce. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Are you guys working with green tree pythons as well?
not currently. No. I used to keep an Aru, just those lone Aru years ago. I probably had him for close to 15 years before he passed away.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, JD, Kit, thank you both very much for coming on. I think we're gonna have to have you back on to talk about other species because we basically just discussed Antaresia today. But thank you for all the awesome information. I think people are gonna learn a lot from this. There is definitely a lack of information out there on.
There is.
Um,
It's even
yeah,
like me, I've been keeping for so long, and like even for me, I just have to piece everything together all the time. You know what I mean? On any new species I'm trying to learn, because it's usually something that there's not a lot of information on, and if it's not balls or bloods or burbs or retics in pythons, there's probably not a ton of info out there on it. You know, but yeah. yeah, just
Yeah.
a lot of book searching and magazines and online articles, and
And talking to experienced people. Actually, like I was going through all the websites, couldn't find anything, and actually shout out to Tom from Turtle Power. Reached out to, he was like, "These are who you want to talk to," and I'm like, and that's when I first found you guys, and I've been bugging you guys since.
Yeah, definitely. And if you've been shows and stuff, that is a good place to talk to other breeders and get tips and things like that. We're lucky enough to have a few really long-term great breeders here in Ohio that we then shows with that, I brush up with and get information from, or tips from, or whatever. And I share tips with them and things like that. So that's the best part about that is the community. We do have a pretty good community here, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, thank you both very much once again. Can you let everyone know where they can find you?
You can find us at Slithering Oddities on Instagram, our Facebook page, Slithering Oddities, or YouTube at Slithering Oddities.
Also TikTok now.
TikTok, yes, we are on TikTok.
Nice. Awesome. Perfect.
Even Twitch here and there in the near future. I've been playing around with that a little bit, so.
Yeah, live streaming just in the snake room. That sounds like an awesome idea.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. All of those links will be in the description. Thank you both very much. Thank you, everyone who's listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
having us.